Alright, and we're going to go for take 3 on this particular video, as my cat got in the way on the first take, and the second take, for some reason, it did not save the file. So, take 3. Welcome back. We are done with the Puritans. I will congratulate you. That's probably some of the hardest reading that you'll do in your undergraduate or early graduate career. Winthrop is no joke. The Sumptuary Law was written a very long time ago and is not apparently obvious what it's trying to do. Danforth's sermon is a beast. If you're not a scholar of religion and religious history, the Puritans can really be difficult sometimes. And then Perry Miller is one of the sort of godfathers of our discipline in American studies. His work, he did a book called The 17th Century Mind, which is fantastic, if a bit old. I think he wrote that in 1939. And then he wrote Errand into the Wilderness in the 50s. I think like 1950 was when he published that, along with several other articles in a collected volume called Errand into the Wilderness. Very, very good work. I know some of you have read it with Dr. Bronner in American Studies 500, his theory and method class, and hopefully you were able to get something new out of it coming at it with me, because we're not really looking at quite the same thing. But again, congratulations, you actually deal with the hardest week in the first week, and I am sorry for that. But I really wanted to not start in the 19th century and not start, just so often I feel like in our field, in American studies, we have a tendency to skip the colonial era, and I find that to be sad. And I think Dr. Verplank would cheer me for doing that, because I know that she feels the same way. She teaches our American Studies. I forget what the course number is, but it's the 18th century sort of seminar readings class. Very, very good course for anyone who might be interested in that. It's a 500. Anyway, so congratulations, as I said. Very quickly, I'm going to do the videos a little bit differently this week. There's going to be more than one, but they're going to be much shorter. So, just be on the lookout for that. This video, we're going to talk a little bit about sort of getting from Puritanism and New England to the Revolution and then to the 19th century. And we're going to do it by talking about gender. There's a really great article. It's a bit old and a bit dated, and there are some problems with it. I'm not going to say that there aren't. But it's called The Cult of True Womanhood. It was published in American Quarterly back in the 1970s. It's a really good article on gender in, they're talking about the 1840 to 1860 period. And I'm going to connect that to the Puritan model. If you're interested in gender, Laurel Thatcher Ulrich is a writer who has done a significant amount of scholarship on that subject, particularly in northern New England in the 17th and 18th century. And so much of what I'm talking about here is taken from that, as well as some of Mary Beth Norton's work, Carol Carlson, and others, including another really good book called Good Wives, Nasty Wenches, and Anxious Patriarchs, which is about the Chesapeake region. So, anyway, that's my little speech on sort of where I'm taking these things from. And again, I like to try to throw out some books that if you're doing research on these kinds of topics, are a good place to start. So, anyway, we left off with Danforth and his sermon, where he is calling the Puritans back to their first love. And you'll forgive me if I use a lot of sort of biblical imagery here. I study religion, and people tell me I talk like a preacher sometimes. It's just what happens. Also, my father is a preacher, so yeah, I get it from both ends. Anyway, it goes, the thing with Danforth, for those of you who might not have seen it in my comments, his style will come to call the Jeremiad, which is a type of literary genre in which one is identifying the current problem. In religion, it's the problem of sin. It's that the people are misbehaving. You will then point to past glory, to, how good things used to be, or to what the mission was. You will then point out that the mission is failing, and it's failing because of that sort of current problem. And then you'll plot a course to get back to it, to get back to this mission, to get back to the good old days. And you see that if you read Danforth's sermon. It is a Jeremiad. It is laying out the declension of the Puritan Church in the second and third and fourth generations. And he's trying to chart a path back. His problem is that people are interested in money. They're interested in worldliness and satisfying their carnal flesh, their sort of worldly desires. They're not interested in the spiritual. They're interested in the material, the here and the now, getting rich, advancing social class, advancing social station. And so that's Danforth, right? And if you go back to Winthrop and what he was saying about Keene and what he was saying about sort of capitalism, he was hostile. This was something a few of you got wrong on, and I would encourage you to go back and reread. He was hostile to capitalism. He was not interested in you selling too dearly. He wanted you to sell at a price that was good for the community. And that is not Adam Smith. That is not capitalism. That is not, everyone looks to their own self-interest and that generates something good, right? That's the sort of foundational logic of capitalism. I do what's best for me. You do what's best for you. I make good widgets. You make good something else, and we trade them with each other. And, I'm being greedy, you're being greedy, and our greed works out okay. All right, so and I know for any of you who teach like econ and whatnot, I know I am oversimplifying wildly here, but we're just trying to kind of give a brief overview. So the point is, even in Winthrop's day, this was a problem. By Danforth's day, it's a major problem. By the end of the 17th century, it's still a problem, but it's not one that most people are talking about. Most people have just come to accept it. Again, this is where Perry Miller's interpretation about the failure of the initial errand, but then maybe there's a second definition for errand that they can then pursue. That's where that comes in. So in the 18th century, moving out of the 1600s and into the 1700s, trade is going to enrich the colonies. Now look, the colonies in what would later be the United States will never be as wealthy as the colonies in Barbados, Bermuda, Jamaica. I know this sounds like a Beach Boys song, but, these colonies in those places that are growing sugar will get insanely wealthy as a result of the sugar trade. Sugar is basically white gold. But the colonies here are going to settle into a middle-class respectability. They're not going to be as refined as, say, England. They're not going to be as wealthy as Barbados. But they are going to not be tied to the old feudal system and the old feudal duties that still plague England even into the 18th century. And so it's going to be a place that's going to develop its own character, its own way of being. And this is part of what is going to lead to the revolution. Is this shift in interest in the colonies towards their own self-interest not being aligned with that of Great Britain itself. Great Britain, the sort of mother country, right? In these days, in this period, this sort of colonial period pre-revolution, women were oftentimes looked at as what they would consider the husband's lieutenant, meaning that the man was the head of the house and he was in charge, and women were supposed to submit to the husband, to the father, as though they were submitting to God, because that's the way God ordained the universe to work according to their theology. When the husband was away, though, the wife could exercise the rights of the husband, could exercise leadership as his lieutenant. This, by the time of the revolution, though, is going to fade into what we call Republican motherhood. The idea that people like Hamilton and Jefferson and Madison and Washington and such are going to have is that women should, rather than being involved heavily in the informal economic activities that they had been, the spinning and the weaving and such, so that they can trade, they should be focusing on raising good citizens as children. These children will then become the leaders of tomorrow. And this is going to force women more and more back into the home. Now, I am not trying to say that colonial women had it perfect, okay? Please don't hear that. But compared to women in the early 19th century, they had more autonomy, more freedom, and more ability to help their husband to direct their lives. As the 19th century wears on, the Republican mother concept will get subsumed into what they call the cult of domesticity. This is going back to that article from American Quarterly. The cult of domesticity, or the cult of true womanhood, is going to suggest that women should be pure, they should be pious, they should be submissive, and they should be domestic. You know, sexually pure, morally pure. They should be pious, they should love God, they should be submissive, they says, because they're supposed to be says, and then they should be domestic. They should be masters in the domain of the house, separate spheres. Men rule the public sphere, which is business outside the home and politics. Women rule the domestic sphere, the cooking, the cleaning, the raising of the children, the keeping of the house. And in her sphere she is queen, in his sphere he is king. This way of thinking contributes to what we see in the book Consumer Rights. We go from this Puritan sense of not celebrating these holidays, staying away from the festivities, because they might make us impure, they might lead us into sin, they might take us away from God, to this bacchanalian revelry. This is on page 8 in the introduction, in the version that I have. Okay, he talks on this topic some. And one of the interesting aspects is that women are going to be very involved in establishing the holidays the way that they are celebrated in the 19th century. And they're going to do it in part as an effort to make the holidays more pure, less secular, less profane. They're going to try to sacralize the holidays, make them more sacred. This is in keeping with this cult of true womanhood concept, that the reason the woman is supposed to do these 4 things is because men are simply despicable. We're bad. And we need women to make us better. Okay? That is the logic here, is that she's pure, she's pious, she's submissive, and she's domestic, so that she's an example and lead men to Christ, lead men to God. Okay? And so, by making the holidays something that happens in the home, rather than something that happens at the local tavern, she's able to bring those profane activities, the celebration that at the tavern might involve loose women and lots of alcohol, and bring those into the home where she can monitor them and be part of them and help to shape it. So this is just something that I wanted to point out. Schmidt talks about it briefly in his book, but I think it's worth really bringing to bear, because of, this issue. One of the, key things in American studies is that we try to see things whole. We try to see things the way that they are. We tend to look at race and class and gender a lot. We look at those three things when we look at them in different ways, in popular culture, in folklore and folk life, in consumer culture, in politics, in religion, and we try to look at the sort of everyday experiences of ordinary people very often. That aiming for is to understand those kinds of things. And there is nothing more everyday and ordinary than home life and that sort of domestic sphere. So, anyway, keep that in mind. Think about this issue of gender as you're reading your text, okay? So, if you have any questions, of course, continue to contact me. Many of you have been doing very well with that. I will continue checking things on a regular basis and seeing how things are going. Hopefully you're all seeing that this is a pretty self-motivated kind of course. And most of you have been doing a really good job with that. Those of you who are a little bit behind, get caught up. But I'm going to sign off for now and get this posted and be looking for one more quick video clip like this, maybe 15 minutes or so, at some point here shortly. I will catch up with you later. Bye-bye.